Thank you very much. Great job, guys. Okay, now it is my pleasure to present Mr. Frank and Eric Lee to do a piano duet. These are 12-year-old accomplished pianists, and they are twins. They attend North Muskegon schools. They're 7th graders in the middle school there. And they have also placed second in the Muskegon's Got Talent musical contest. So I'm very excited to have them come up and play us a duet. So come on up, Frank and Eric. Thank you, boys. That was wonderful. Their mother tells me that they're very interested in giving back to the community and helping to raise community awareness. And with their music, that's very awesome. We'll be hearing from each one of them individually just a little bit later. We allow our ignorance to prevail upon us and make us think we can survive alone, alone in patches, alone in groups, alone in races, even alone in genders. Maya Angelou. Now I would like to present Mr. Dan Collison, who is an instructor here at MCC, and he's going to let you know about 6 things you might not have heard.
If you feel as if you haven't heard a whole lot about HIV within the U.S. over the past few years, you're right. Although 50,000 Americans become HIV positive each year, and well over 1 million are living with the virus, it gets little attention from the media. Most news headlines focus on the epidemic in Africa, Latin America, and developing countries. But while news and activism have mostly looked elsewhere, an awful lot has changed about HIV since it was the #1 health scare in the U.S. in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Here's a sampling of some of the biggest developments in HIV that you may have missed. By 2007, Timothy Brown was running out of time. His HIV was under control, but he also had an aggressive form of leukemia. A stem cell transplant was deemed necessary to treat the leukemia. But his doctor wondered, If he could find a stem cell donor with a very rare immunity to the most common type of HIV, could it stop both the leukemia and the HIV? It could, and did. Years after the transplant, Brown appears to be completely HIV-free, making him the first, and thus far only, person who has ever been considered cured of the virus. Brown's life since then hasn't been a cakewalk, and the procedure that cured him is expensive and extremely difficult to duplicate. But his story has reignited hope that a cure for everyone will be found in our lifetime. Some think a related form of gene therapy may be the key. Most people in the U.S. tend to think one of two things about HIV. They either believe it is still a death sentence, or they believe it is basically nothing to worry about anymore. The reality is somewhere in the middle. People with HIV now live about as long as everyone else does, provided they start HIV treatment while their immune system is still strong. There are now more than 30 different HIV medications. When the right meds are combined in the right way, they can keep people with HIV healthy indefinitely. There are side effects, but they're usually manageable. In the late 1990s, keeping HIV at bay meant taking a dozen or more pills several times a day. Now, it often means taking a single pill once a day. It's a miraculous turnaround. We all know that abstinence, or if you have sex, faithfulness and condom use, are the best ways to avoid getting or transmitting HIV through sex. But those steps aren't always options. Many women, men, and young people have little power over the risks they face. But that may soon change. In 2010, we saw signs that a gel applied vaginally or perhaps anally may help protect against HIV. We've seen evidence that a daily pill may reduce HIV risk for some people. And in 2009, we saw the first ray of hope for the Holy Grail, an HIV vaccine. On top of all of that, 2011 brought news that HIV-positive people on stable treatment have a very low chance of passing HIV to their sex partners. It's clear that we'll soon have more tools for stopping the spread of HIV, provided we can get those tools into the hands of those who need them most. Despite all the advances we've made against HIV, the stigma of living with HIV is as crippling now as it's ever been. Even many governments are still in the dark when it comes to HIV awareness. Just look at the growing number of HIV-positive people who are arrested and in some cases sent to prison simply for having sex, even when the person they were sleeping with knew they had HIV. The most famous of these HIV criminalization cases may be that of German pop star Nadia Benassa. In some cases, it's not even about sex. Nebraska recently passed a law that increases penalties for people who spit on police officers if they know they have HIV, even though HIV can't be transmitted through spitting. Such laws expose how much ignorance about HIV persists in our society and only discourage people from getting tested for HIV. For nearly 3 decades, even as it dished out ever greater amounts of money to fight HIV overseas through PEPFAR, most notably, the U.S. had no actual plans for how to fight HIV within its borders. That changed last year with the introduction of the first ever national HIV/AIDS strategy. It's not a perfect plan, and a tremendous amount of work remains in implementing it and ensuring its success. But the sheer existence of the strategy has generated a new hope for an improvement in long neglected and poorly supervised efforts to fight HIV transmission, increase HIV education, and provide much needed treatment and services to people living with HIV within the U.S. For 22 years, people living with HIV who were not American citizens were not allowed to enter the U.S. But in late 2009, President Barack Obama finally overturned the long-held but completely illogical travel ban. The removal of the travel ban is more than just a win for the rights of people living with HIV. It marks an important step towards ensuring that HIV in this country is treated like other chronic transmissible diseases. And it's a major blow against the unfounded stigma against HIV that remains so persistent in our society. As a result of the lifting of the travel ban, the world's largest meeting of the global HIV community will take place in Washington, D.C. next summer. The gathering of more than 30,000 people takes place only once every 2 years. It has not taken place in the U.S. for more than 2 decades because of the ban.